Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee meeting for Thursday, September the 15th. We'll start with a roll call. Mr. Ryerson. Westerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I couldn't remember who you were.
That's all right. That's all right. Councillor Palladino.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
Here.
Councillor Carlson. He is here.
On his way down.
Give him a quick moment here, but Councillor Campbell.
Here.
And we'll get the councillor's attendance when he's here. Online, several members of administration, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And I thought I heard Mr. Carlson. Okay, he has arrived.
And some of your esteemed colleagues off to the right as well.
Okay, thanks. All right. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people, past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationships to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region Number 3. We'll have a consent agenda from Councillor Palladino. Be it resolved that the agenda of the regular meeting of the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee on Thursday, September 15th, 2022 be adopted as presented. Mr. Palladino.
I call the question on that.
Question's been called. All in favor? Be it resolved from Councillor Carlson that the minutes of the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee held on Thursday, June 16th be approved, and the chair and the city clerk designate be authorized to sign the same. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I trust everyone had a chance to review them. I saw no errors or omissions or questions, so unless there's anything from my colleagues.
Question's been called. All in favor? Opposed? You are? I can't. Oh, you're not on the committee. That's right. Oh, I forgot. All right. He can be opposed all yes. Okay. Presentations. Let us begin with the presentations. I understand we have Craig Brown from the Lethbridge Library and Angela Viola, who are presenting, and Terry Plato is also here and available for questions. Take it away. Whatever. Craig.
Thank you very much.
Are there dance numbers? No, there's no dance numbers. Okay.
Well, I was going to hum and let Angela do it, and I decided not to do that.
Oh, fair enough. Thanks.
Anyways, good afternoon. I'm pleased to present to you today the library's 2022 to 2026 Plan of Service. Next slide. In 2021, the board undertook a strategic planning process with the goal of developing a new plan of service that responds to emerging environmental factors, incorporates best practices and trends in library services, and is based on community needs. As part of the planning process, the board reaffirmed the library's mission and vision statements. Our mission is to be a welcoming, inclusive space that connects and strengthens community through equitable access to learning and leisure. We strive to be the community's choice for the pursuit of literacy, leisure, learning, and innovation. Next slide. We also reviewed our values and added a value related to diversity and inclusion. It states that we value the diversity of our community and strive to reflect that diversity through inclusive planning and services. The 2022 to 26 Plan of Service is a comprehensive and forward-looking document that recognizes and builds on the values and strengths of the library and the community. Next slide. The board engaged Barbara Peterson Facilitation Services to lead the board through the transformational strategic planning process that included engagement of the community and a wide variety of stakeholders to learn about community needs. The library engaged residents, library users and members, staff, community organizations, municipal leaders, and other stakeholders through individual interviews, focus groups, online input sessions, outreach events, a survey on our website and social media, and through the library newsletter. From this, common themes of what is most important to the community were identified and formed the building blocks for our strategic goals and strategies. And I'll turn it over to Angela, and she'll bring you up to speed on the goals and strategies. Thank you.
So the board identified 6 key strategic goals over the next 5 years, along with accompanying overarching strategies and objectives. Our 5-year goals are: 1, the community experiences Lethbridge Public Library as a gathering place and hub. 2, more users enjoy the benefits of Lethbridge Public Library and become members. 3, Lethbridge Public Library is a model of welcoming and inclusive spaces. 4, the community has improved access to Lethbridge Public Library's physical and virtual spaces. 5, the community discovers and uses spaces at Lethbridge Public Library that inspire creativity. And 6, the community has opportunities to build multiple literacy skills. Next slide, please. So the 9 overarching strategies to reach our goals include specific objectives and measures. Each strategy contributes to the Lethbridge reaching our goals over the next, to the library reaching our goals over the next 5 years. So I won't go into detail on the strategies, but we'll just give you a summary of each one. So strategy 1 focuses on being a community gathering place and connecting to the community. Next slide. Strategy 2 focuses on deepening our knowledge and understanding of who is in our community and removing barriers for library use. Next slide. Strategy 3 is about providing value to the community and getting memberships into the hands of every Lethbridgian. Next slide, please. Strategy 4 focuses on getting people back into the library's physical spaces post-pandemic and providing both physical and virtual spaces that inspire learning in all its forms. Next slide. Strategy 5 ensures that we are incorporating our value of diversity, equity, and inclusion into all aspects of what we do, from workforce and volunteer recruitment to programs and collections. Next slide, please. Strategy 6 is about ensuring that we can continue to serve residents virtually and expand our virtual offerings. Next slide, please. Strategy 7 is about planning for the future of library facilities in our city as our population grows and community needs evolve. Next slide, please. Strategy 8 focuses our fund development efforts on priority areas. Next slide. And lastly, strategy 9 is about better engaging those in the community who use and support the library. The 2022 to 2026 plan of service will serve as a roadmap for delivery of library services over the next 5 years and guides library management and staff in their work, while also being flexible enough to meet challenging community needs. Next slide. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present our plan of service today. And Craig and Tara and I are happy to take questions if you have any.
Thank you very much for the information. Let me just start with a quick question. I'm just seeing plans for a reimagined downtown branch are in place. Can you give me elaborate a little bit? What does that mean? Is that physically, or is it just?
I think I'll let Tara speak more to this if she wants to correct me, but there is a facilities master plan underway, which may or may not include a new building. So that's a long-term plan that would depend on community needs. But Tara can correct me if...
No, Angela said exactly
Right.
the right thing. So the idea is by the end of the 5 years that there is a plan. It doesn't mean we will have a building. It means that there's a plan to ensure that the downtown branch is meeting the community needs going forward.
Right, so that's not necessarily expanding or creating a new building, or maybe it is?
The idea would be to have a plan in place for what that's going to look like over the next 10, 20 years.
Great, sure. Questions from my fellow councillors here today? Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you. So the question is to the three of you. You've indicated in your proposal that you're looking for an inclusive and engaging community for everyone. And that's a very laudable direction to go, and certainly a goal to achieve. However, you, I'm sure, have received, like the city has received, numerous complaints of homelessness around your building, the interference of people coming and going to your building. The city certainly has received a substantial number of complaints from citizens who are trying to access the library. I'd like to know what you're prepared to do to address that issue.
Yeah, so obviously homelessness is a community issue, and it's not a library created issue, or nor are we in the position to solve homelessness in our community. So we are one of the institutions in the community in the downtown that it deals with the challenges related to homelessness populations and addictions and that sort of thing. So our role is to really, how do we respond to that in an inclusive and welcoming way? So we have a code of conduct that governs, and it's always been in place, that governs behavior in the library. So illegal behavior that is disruptive to other patrons, is dealt with according to our code of conduct and our bylaws. So we have security guards in place. We've had to increase our security contingent over the last several years 3 times in order to deal with the number of issues that we have been experiencing an increase of in the last several years. So our security team enforces our code of conduct to the ability that they're able to. Like anyone else, our enforcement ability is limited. Sounds like sounded like my microphone went off for a second. Our enforcement ability is limited. We're not the police, so we have a progressive ban system in place, and so that's what we use. And then we do rely on community resources like the police to help us enforce when we have bans in place. So we've done many things over the last few years. It's a very long-running list, actually, including decreasing the number of access points to the building, ensuring we have security stationed at each access point. We also have social services on site, including community links. We're piloting a crisis intervention worker position right now. And all of this is to ensure that the library is a safe place for everybody in the community, understanding that we have been challenged by those issues as everybody has in the downtown.
Well, thank you for that fulsome explanation. I think it's helpful. In terms of managing the complaints, so we should be taking the complaints from the city and just turning them back over to you to manage? Because we get a fair number of them.
Yeah, as do we. So again, we respond to complaints as we get them. Certainly, if you would like the libraries like to know what we're doing in relation to complaints and how we manage the issues, we're happy to share that information. Yep.
Yeah, and I can just add, we'd love to hear from our patrons if they are concerned and they've gone to the city to complain about it, to let us know so that we can speak with them on a one-to-one basis and hopefully allay some of their concerns.
I think listening is important. I think solutions are also important. Thank you.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Chair Campbell. Thank you for being here today and updating us and, in turn, our colleagues about the strategic plan and the long-term plan. I really appreciated reading it. I thought the 5-year goals are excellent. I, for one, really appreciate the focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think our community has changed over the years, and we've got to be more inclusive of the different cultures and peoples that are in our community. So seeing that as an added value was amazing to me. The strategies and objectives, I appreciated, you went through them rather quickly there, but thank you for providing us the full report so we could see how you're going to accomplish these, because they are some lofty goals, so I appreciate that. If I might take another tack, I'd like to know, just because I have this opportunity with you folks in front of us, some of the challenges that may have been experienced by yourselves with the what is it now, 2 years ago, our funding and hours reductions, and how those were rolled out, what challenges, or did things work out well? Just kind of curious, if you don't mind me probing on that.
Before I hand it over to Tara to comment, we've done ongoing surveys of the patrons who use the library, and the one thing in our recent survey they came back with was to extend the hours. So if there's one common complaint that we're hearing, it's that we have cut back on the library hours. Tara, anything you want to add to that one?
Yeah, that's basically what I was going to say. So we did cut back on the hours, and you know, we did so strategically to try and still serve the community as best we can. That being said, we have pretty limited evening hours as a result, and the library, you know, is a popular place for people, especially, you know, it is one of the few places in the downtown that remains open, and you know, having people in the downtown using it in a positive way, it only contributes to having an active downtown that people want to go to. And so we've definitely seen, you know, a decrease in our ability to have evening programs, to rent, we rent out meeting rooms to the public, very low cost. So it's impacted those. People, we can still rent the library, but there's additional costs now because we have to staff the library, have security and maintenance there. And as Craig said, we just reviewed our survey results from earlier this year. We had about 400 respondents, and the number one suggestion was to expand hours. So I would say that yes, definitely some of the public is missing that. It does limit, you know, it limits some of the things we're able to do, and the number of programs we can run as a result. But again, we made those choices as responsible as we could in terms of ensuring there was still a service to the public.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one final question, if I can. In the full report, there are measures of success or measurables provided for each goal and objective. How often are you going to be updating either this committee or council on how you're meeting those goals? Is it an annual basis? Is it semi-annual? Is it just an email?
Yeah, so we do obviously ongoing measurements. So some of these things take a lot longer to measure. You know, when we're looking at, for example, the community satisfaction survey that the city runs, obviously that if that's annually or every 2 years, then it can take longer to see trends and to see what impact we're having, but we do come and report to this committee annually on our activities from the last year as well as our successes. So the measures that we are able to report on an annual basis will be included in that annual report back to this committee.
Thank you for that. Once again, just to close for me, I really appreciate the work. And one thing, Mr. Brown, the President's message was the best President's message I've ever seen because it was the shortest. I always say that.
People don't want to listen to me. I'm well aware of that.
I always try and keep any of my messages very short. So when I read yours, I'm like, now I have another goal to beat. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that.
Do we have any other questions from councillors? I have none. Thank you for your report. Thanks for coming before us, and good luck on the word on the street this weekend. Woo-hoo.
Super. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
I have a resolution from Councillor Palladino. Be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee recommends that City Council receive as information the Lethbridge Public Library 2022-2026 Plan of Service as an Attachment 1. Councillor Palladino.
Yeah, as I understand it and what we heard, after much community engagement, the Lethbridge Public Library has come up with a 5-year plan, which includes 9 strategies, such as being a gathering place to raising memberships and incorporating diversity and inclusion, and other initiatives. So if there are no further questions, I would call a question on this.
No further questions. Question's been called. All in favor? That passes. Thank you. Up next, we have a presentation from Social Services Integration Group, Monica Lowen and Josh Marty. If you can come before us. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Monica Lowen. This is Josh Marty. We are the co-chairs of the Social Services Integration Group. In the parallel report to our report from Michael Bowe, there was good detail into the mandate and the history of the SIG, so I'm not going to go through that. You have a good understanding of who we are and where we came from. Can I get the next slide, please? Also, part of the report from administration is a detailed list of our membership. And as you can see, this group is quite diverse. It was intentionally chosen to represent different portions of the community. I do want to clarify, though, that the members of this committee did not speak for any specific group, while their participation was rather based on their ability to look at the recommendations through the eyes of someone from that particular population segment. So the recommendations we're putting forward today come only from the members as individuals, not as their representatives of their different population groups.
Thank you, Monica. So we wanted to be able to give you a bit of some context to the presentation here, which is more of just a snapshot of our recommendations and observations that we were able to come to over the 20 meetings that we were able to meet. Would we be able to go to the next slide? So we had 3 recommendations and 6 observations. And so before we get into like this first one, just a little context about accepting SIG citing criteria and guidelines for priority social services. We wanted to identify which priority groups we're talking about because it can become a very broad term. So what we did in our appendix is broken out these different priority social services into group 1, which is your non-confrontational, they're fairly conventional, they're active within the community. Are they cited in the land use bylaw, yes or no? And for the most part they were. And so we wanted to acknowledge where we would place those within our city. And then group 2 is the more high acuity individuals, those active or more controversial subjects we've been dealing with for the last couple of years, and how we would deal with placing these social services. So in terms of like shelters, detox centers, et cetera. So as we go into our citing criteria, I don't know if you've had a chance to review our document, but I just wanted to at least kind of just briefly go through citing criteria just so you can kind of get a context where group 1 fits really the first 5 key points of how we would place those groups. And so initially we would want them to be able to see these particular groups developed in accordance with any sort of applicable legislation or standards. We know that the BC Housing Guideline has a document on how to develop shelters. So we just want to reference any applicable documents that have been thoroughly examined to applicable these variables that we deal with. I don't know that Alberta has that. From our research, we weren't able to see that Alberta had identified a document, but if there is, that'd be great. We did say that these group 1 social services would be 150 meters away from kindergarten to grade 12 schools. And so we went through this mapping exercise, and you'll see in the appendix the maps where we created this 150 meter buffer. We originally talked about a 400 meter buffer, and we realized, by goodness, this city is full of parks. We have a lot of good green space, and so kudos to city planning for that. So in terms of narrowing it down, we also delineated parks that had playgrounds, that had a focus for children being in that area. And so these maps that you see as part of this appendix create a 150 meter buffer from those locations. The other piece to this was that we would place these social services in a way that they don't actually abut any arterial roadways. And the reason for this is we want to keep our commercial corridors to be able to attract business, retain them, as well as expand our commercial districts so that they are the tax-paying businesses in our city, and we don't want to inundate those areas with tax exemptions when they were intended to create revenues for the city. Number 4 was just creating the 150 meter buffer from businesses that rely heavily on foot traffic so that the candy shops or your retail establishments, that they're not being inundated with the population. And then just number 5 was just to keep each of these services, not that they cluster too much together, and that there's again, 150 meter buffer from each other so that we're not clustering. Now group 2, on the other hand, this is where we defined the core service area from north of Crozes Trail, south of Fifth Avenue, and west of Stafford Drive. It's been an area of the city that's been commonly talked about. As we've gone through this group, through all the different lenses, we came to a consensus that this area of the city does make sense in terms of moving forward with these sorts of high impact users. So the group 2 in our services, we would love to see in the core service area. So this now brings us into our second recommendation, where we would then ask that the city consider taking an area redevelopment plan for this core service area, where this part of the city could be transitioned from the existing land use descriptions that we see in the zonings in there to something that could be able to facilitate these higher acuity users, that could facilitate the community care campus that has been proposed. That this would be able to fit right into that focus. And then the third recommendation that we've come up with was to consider expanding the definitions for supportive housing. As we've reviewed this definition, it's a very broad brush. It doesn't take into account any nuance. And a lot of times we are dealing with a lot of issues that may or may not be applicable to these sorts of situations. So in that we've expanded, I won't go through all these definitions in detail, but in terms of dealing with recovery housing, abstinent-based, dealing with transitional housing, and especially with those folks who are trying to flee from, let's say, domestic violence, that they would have a place to be able to move into. Oh, I apologize. I forgot there was one extra part to our citing criteria, and it is based on the fact that there would be some exemptions to how we would place some of these priority social services. And so that would be in bullet points 6 to 8 in that document. And this would be for groups that are abstinent-based, that they could maybe be exempted, that they could fit within those areas that are all in white. White is basically open game. Any priority social services that focus on women fleeing from domestic violence. And that's where that undisclosed housing piece came in. Because your city administration is great. When we talked about women fleeing from domestic violence, we can't talk about the user, we got to talk about the use. So in this piece, we want to talk about undisclosed housing. This could be maybe an exemption where they could fit because they're very monitored, and there's a lot of oversight with these types of uses. And then any shelters that with an abstinent focus, maybe that would be outside of the core service area, but it would be temporary in nature. Some of those things that where it's not meant to be a permanent piece. So we just wanted to be clear about which group is which, where we'd like to see them, and then have an exemption-based model, because we know that one size doesn't fit all, and this document's not meant to be a comprehensive, all-inclusive approach, but at least through the lens of our group, we're happy with where this document has gone. So, and then our observations, we'll just quickly, just briefly go into this next slide. Because we've had all of our different lenses going through this, there's a couple things that impact land use and how we would approach that, but necessarily not our exactly part of our mandate. So number one is just to establish a social environmental impact assessment model. As a business would go and apply for a development permit, planning might engage Alberta Health Services, AGLC, and transportation if they feel need be, that they could engage a social environmental impact assessment to go along with that application. Number two, encouraging legislation for a wellness-based policing model. This kind of came from the line of thought where you wouldn't have your grandmother with Alzheimer's walking the streets in cognitive decline. Why would we allow this, these sorts of behaviors, even if they were induced temporarily, to be out on the streets as well? And with the adverse behaviors that go with that, if there's a mental cognitive decline, that there'd be a way to have these folks off the street as well through that lens. Number three was completing a follow resident satisfaction survey. I think the last one was back in 2018. I could be totally wrong on that. Probably be time for an update. This is just an observation. And four was just a request that the province of Alberta consider developing new general abstinence and non-abstinence-based shelters as a focus. You've seen us before in November come to you and say, please do a sober shelter. And of course that didn't happen, but we do believe that there is a place for both demographics having their own place. I think next slide, please. This number five came from some of the Indigenous focus within our group, that the City of Lethbridge continues to work with the Blackfoot Confederacy and the city to, keep this lens on the issue, that it doesn't ever take a back seat. 6 fits into the core service area where, with the Opportunity Lethbridge's land banking strategy, that this could fit into the core service area, that this could be a real focus into acquiring those lands so that when the province does come in, they have the ability to do so. And 7 is basically saying we're not, this is not a be-all end-all document, so consider exploring other exemptions and other relevant details to this document. And last but not least, encouraging all levels of government to work in collaboration to avoid duplication of services, and I know that has been a mandate of the CSD all along. So these are just our observations. We just know that they influence the decision-making, so they're not as critical as our 3 recommendations. So I think that's the highlight of our 20 meetings. We're happy with our work so far, and I think actually there's one more slide here. So we also understand that the city is looking to engage the community on a new sober shelter. And we recognize that we've done a lot of this work already as of last November, and we know that we're not the be-all end-all to community engagement, but we're happy to be a part of this process as you move forward with this. Especially since we've already gone through a whole scoring criteria where we've analyzed different sites, analyzed them through different construction lenses, through social lenses, all the different criteria. We scored them, and we've had a recommendation last November. So we'd want to be able to remain as part of this process. I think, is there one more slide? I'm trying to remember. Okay, so that's the basic our presentation. So
Thank you very much for the presentation. And first off, I just want to say thank you for being on the committee. Just how was it for you? I guess that's a wide question, because that was a challenging committee to be a part of, given the issues that we're always dealing with. But the fact that you got together, and the fact that you got together and talked, I think says a lot. So, this is not kind of looking at the recommendations, but I just want to know the experience of doing what you did, if you can give me a sense of what that was like.
It was challenging. It was an interesting group the first time we sat down and we looked around the room, and it was a lot of varying opinions, but I think what you saw was a deep concern and a deep love for our city. And so it took a few meetings to all get on the same page, but when we all realized we were working towards the same goal, that we got it together, the group gelled. It was never complete consensus. There was strong arguments going on, strong discussion. At the end of the day, though, we really wanted to make a difference for our city. So I think we're very proud of the work that was done. It was long, but it was definitely worth it. And I think I can speak for our entire group when we're pleased with what we were able to do.
Anything you wanted to add to that?
Oh,
No, yeah, sure.
Oh.
Yeah, no. Sorry.
I completely agree. I would say the first 13 to 15 meetings were definitely all over the map. Then we got sidetracked with the emergency shelter in November. But when it came down to actually creating siting criteria, digging into the weeds, finding out what is relevant from all the different lenses, those last 5 meetings were definitely very productive.
And I know, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Fox, but I believe I speak for him when they're looking at these recommendations very seriously, and that what you brought together is very meaningful. Fair to say, Mr. Fox?
Yes, through the chair, I would agree 100%. The administration is aware of all the recommendations and have received them when they submitted them to the city quite a while ago. I know planning and design has started to look at some and how they could incorporate, and also I know Opportunity Lethbridge and Community Social Development all have been, and they all benefited from being part of the 20 meetings with the community and understanding all the different perspectives, and gain lots of insight.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Chair Campbell. Thank you for the report and all the work. I echo the thank yous there. I'd like to, if I can, have you explore, and I've lost my notes, explore the wellness-based policing model a bit with me. It sounds different than what we do now. I'm not sure I'm a fan of the way it read in the report. Are there other jurisdictions where this is a success? And is it a policing job, or is it better served by other organizations?
Yeah, and this was came from a couple different members that aren't here today in terms of their concern for how we deal with different behaviors that are actively on the street. So from a person that's really cognitively impaired, or if you're dealing with dementia and you house them, you don't want them eloping because they're at risk to themselves and to the public. From a mindset, if those sorts of mental acuities are out on the street, we definitely keep them contained. From that point of view, why would we not do the same with maybe mental illness that's induced through drug use or different? So if those behaviors are dealt with a little bit more intentionally, they're more temporary in nature. I think that's just where this was more of an observation. This wasn't part of our recommendation, right? So this is not something that we're going to die on this hill or anything. So it was just more of an observation to deal from that. And then policing could be a good a point of contact, or maybe some of their other groups. Yeah.
And were you able to explore it anywhere? Like, are there any jurisdictions where they?
I wouldn't be able to speak to that. Is there any others from the other group? I'm not aware of that.
I don't believe there was, and I think it was something that was brought up late in the process, and so it was important to members that it was be part of the observations. We don't have a lot of research back into it.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Second question I had was around the social environment impact assessment, and probably not to you, but maybe to our staff, and I'm not sure who here could answer it. Probably needed somebody from planning and development here. But how does this type of social environment assessment differ than what we normally do for these types of locations of sites and et cetera? And I don't know if anyone can jump in.
Through the chair, I can try and answer that one a little bit. Again, we've had several meetings on this since, and I know planning and design will be bringing some of these items forward to council for consideration. I think there is varying parts, but it is in our new MDP. It does say to look at these too. So this just gives us another criteria and another way to look at it. I know Opportunity Lethbridge also was involved in the conversation. So as administration, we still look at these and see how we best can change policy to integrate some of these services into the community. I'm sure as we move forward, there would also need to be more public engagement on this.
So we'll get an update on how this change could be implemented into our current processes?
Correct. My understanding is there will be things as we move forward, just even with MDP. And I believe planning and design was involved quite a bit with SSIG and going through this. So they were quite involved in the discussions that actually came to these points. And there were, as Josh and Monica had mentioned, is there was quite robust conversations around the criteria, and all the stakeholders had their opinions. So we did get quite a bit of feedback, and I don't want to speak for planning and design, but I know that they were taking it very seriously, and my understanding is they are looking at how that could influence some of our moving forward.
Thank you.
I can speak a little bit more to that as well in terms of how we deal with other similar controversial uses that maybe fit into a discretionary use piece of the land use bylaw. There's extra, you have the 3-week appeal period to go through. You might have extra reports to accompany that development permit to see it through to completion. So just like you would supply an environmental report in some cases to satisfy a bank, this might be a report that you would satisfy the city so that they could give their approval.
For that, Mr. Chair, I do have other questions, but I've hopped out to allow my colleagues.
Okay, we do have a number of councillors ready to ask questions. Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you. This question is to Ms. Lowen. Utilizing the term policing in this context, is it more of a generic process that you're looking at as opposed to a specific request for more enhanced police services involved?
Yeah, it is more of a generic term.
That's what I thought. Could I direct you to item number 5 in the observations, in which you speak about it's what sounds like creating, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like a collaborative model between the city, the provincial government, the federal government to work, and the Blackfoot Confederacy to establish a recovery facility outside the city. So how do you envision that as working?
So this came from our Indigenous lens to this group, in the fact that there's, even within their community, that they see both solutions within the city and with outside the city. And there seems to be two camps. One says, you know, get it out of our city. Some say keep it in. And so this is just more of a collaborative focus to say, hey, if some part of these programmings may be a good fit within the city, some of it may be a better fit outside the city, we're just to collaborate, to not just pigeonhole the issue. Yeah.
Thank you. That's good.
Councillor Palladino.
Maybe this is more of a discussion than a question, but when you're talking about your proposed changes to the land use bylaw and an area structure plan and such, and you're defining supportive housing, just be cautious of the fact that, like yesterday I took part of a grand opening of a supportive living facility on the west side, the Buffalo Grace Commons project, $26 million, totally not what I'm thinking about here when I read supportive housing. That's a supported living facility. So maybe when you do look at amending the land use bylaw, that's something you could consider.
Yeah, by all means. When we had originally looked at the spectrum of housing, our focus is obviously more from like the homeless piece to the supportive housing, and then when you get into the affordable piece, those are less controversial. So the nuance lands more with the high acuity individuals, for sure.
Councillor Schmidt-Rempel, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And yes, Ms. Lowen and Mr. Marty, thank you very much for your work on this committee, and thank you very much to the committee for all the work they did. My question is actually for Mr. Fox. We didn't see it in the administration summary sheet, but I do know that we're working on a number of these initiatives already. Can you summarize for us what initiatives we're already working on?
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, the community care campus idea we are working on. Currently, internal discussions are going on around the planning areas in that. I got to bring up all the different areas of the report. Yeah, the sober shelter, as council's aware, we're moving forward with a wider public engagement on that, and continuing to work with the province, the federal government, and the Blackfoot Confederacy, and all the different areas there on where best locations would be. And we do continue to work with other stakeholders and the advisory group on trying to advance some of the issues that came up in the SSIG. As we move forward, and this report is a report, we will be providing it to the advisory committee as well as we move forward.
Okay, and will you be reporting back to council on a regular basis on what is being worked on out of this report?
Some of the items we may be able to just implement. Other items will need a council decision. If it is council's will, though, we can do regular updates on these specific items and the recommendations, and also the observations. So if council wants us to report back on each individual one, we could do that.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Chair Campbell. If I can, following up on Deputy Mayor's question and comments, I had very similar thoughts. I appreciate that there was an administrative response accompanying this, but I was hoping to see, I'll be honest, more of actual response to each of the recommendations. I know that the recommendation is just to receive it as information. I'm wondering, to satisfy at least me, if not my colleagues, if referring it to administration for a more complete response. Because in this, I saw many things we were already doing or had done, like the community or citizen satisfaction survey. We just did another one. Probably wouldn't know of, but council's been monitoring it for the budget work we're doing. But things like that, I'd like to get done, in progress. This one's going to take a lot of work, and here's where we think it could go. So I'm wondering if the committee, instead of just receiving this information, referred it back to administration for, and I hate to dump more work on folks' plate as usual, but just sort of a report back on what recommendations we are working on, can be working on, et cetera, or some that would say, no, this is $1 million request, it might not be appropriate at this time. Would that be an appropriate response to this report?
Through the chair, that could be, if the committee wishes, yeah, we could. I'm not sure that some of the items we could put timelines on for you, as some of them, like let's say we were talking about an area redevelopment plan. That's a much bigger discussion, as once one area redevelopment plan starts, there are other activities in that area that can't take place. So we wouldn't want to impede some work that's already ongoing with something like that. But again, I would have to work across the corporation to understand timelines, and I could try and get a report back.
Thank you. And if I was to make that motion or a referral, do you have any idea of what kind of resources would be needed to back that up? As I said, I hate dumping things on people's already full plates.
I believe, through the chair, I believe we have some of the information as the social land banking and different items like that, as they're moving forward, would be fairly easy to get some of the information. Others may take more resources. And again, I couldn't speak for the other departments on this. As far as community social development, it would be, we would be able to get in short order. However, a lot of our time right now is spent on operating budgets and making sure that we have all the initiatives coming forward and working with all of our stakeholders on some of the challenges that are posed at this budget.
And thank you. I think for me, the timeline, I agreed we're sort of up to our eyeballs in budget right now. So I was thinking a timeline of into the first quarter of next year rather than 2 weeks. So hopefully I'll consider that.
And through the chair, if it was something to bring back in the new year, I think we could give a more fulsome update at that time.
Any other questions from any of my colleagues? I see none, and I know that the 5.2.2, that is just a parallel administrative report that everyone can read. This is the resolution will include receiving his information on that, unless Councillor Carlson wants to add to this resolution.
Thank you. I think we're working on something right now, Mr. Chair.
Shall we take a minute here?
I could even get a cup of coffee during that.
We'll take a, I think we'll take a quick, let's go 5 minutes. We'll be right back. Thank you for your presentation, and we'll have a resolution coming up. But thank you. We're about ready to get back to it here. Okay. I have a resolution from Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel Be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee recommends that City Council receive this as information, and further be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee refer this item to administration for a more complete response to the SSIG observations and recommendations, with a report back to the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee on January in 2023. Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, after some wordsmithing and working through here with Mr. Carlson, or with Councillor Carlson, who had the same concerns I did with just leaving the resolution as accepting for information. I would like to see if we could get more information back on this as well, just so that council has a more fuller understanding of what we've worked on, a summary of those recommendations, where we're at with them, and what we still need to be moving forward with, as well as where we may need to look at some spending focuses, that kind of idea. So with that, I would ask for my colleagues' support on this.
I see we have a question first off, or is it, I imagine, Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Chair Campbell. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for responding so speedily to my thoughts. I appreciate that. My question would be through you, Chair, to administration. We've got the date of January 2023 in there. I'm just cognizant of we'll be wrapping up budget and then implementing budget. I'm wondering if that's an appropriate date, or if we said no later than March, so it's at least in the first quarter, but it gives some breathing room between budget and Christmas for folks.
Through the chair, I believe planning and design would be amenable to that. I'm not trying to speak for them, but a lot of the work would fall on their timelines. But we will try to have it back in the early new year. But if you did say make that amendment, that would probably give other departments a little more breathing room.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor. I wonder if you'd appreciate. Oh, excellent.
No, and that's fine.
Excellent. Thank you. Just as I said, I'm always cognizant of saying, here's more on your already full plates, because then I know you're going to come back and say we need more staff. So I'd like the extra time. So thank you.
Any other questions on the now revised resolution? I don't think anything else you'd like to add, Deputy Mayor?
I will call the vote.
Vote's been called. Everyone in favor? That passes. Very good. Thank you. Moving on to 5.3. Ross Kilgore, Senior Community Planner. And I believe are you speaking? Yeah. Mr. Kilgore, also will be here is Andrew Malcolm, Charlene Bruised-Head, Mountain Horse, Gillian Bracken as well. And we'll start with you, Mr. Kilgore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the council. So yes, I believe you've introduced everyone, so I'll oh, no, that's great. Thank you.
Take that thunder away from you.
So we were last year in front of you with this this overview of placemaking projects in December last year. So we wanted to give you just a very brief kind of reminder about what this is all about, first of all, and then we'll move on to our individual work areas. So placemaking is a conceptual framework and a hands-on approach to guide the activation, enhancement, and reimagination of public spaces. It can provide our residents with a wide range of benefits, such as creating safe, active, and healthy public spaces, as well as economic benefits, particularly to businesses in the area around the placemaking project. And as well, we have a couple of relevant policies in our new MDP to do with placemaking as well that direct us to do this work. So today we'll give you a bit of an update on a range of projects across our work areas. Next slide, please. So turning to my work area in planning, first of all, policies 40 and 57 in our new MDP deal specifically with placemaking, although there are many others that contribute to it through encouraging good design of developments and the public realm and transportation projects. There are certainly lots of examples of our staff in their day-to-day work contributing to placemaking. For example, development officers working hand in hand with staff in urban revitalization or public art and so on, to make sure that that interface between private developments and public realm works well and contributes to placemaking. The recent example being the post office and their improvements there on 4th Ave. And just as a sidebar, we have the first MDP annual report will be coming to you in October, which will go into a lot more detail in terms of how we're implementing these policies. Next slide, please. Turning to the heritage side of our work, we are currently working on the new Heritage Management Plan update, which of course is taking a bit of a wider view of our heritage, including Indigenous heritage, and so that will be coming back to this committee in October with a draft plan. And then we have a number of heritage-based placemaking projects that are currently underway. Lots of opportunities for heritage-based placemaking, such as a partnership that we have underway right now with the Historical Society and the Heart of Our City Committee to work on new interpretive signage for the new Scotiabank in the downtown, about the history of those few blocks of the downtown early in the city's life. And we have a really interesting one underway called the Battle of the Belly River Research Project, which is all about the Blackfoot Cree battle in the River Valley about 150 years ago. So we're partnering with the Galt Museum, the Historical Society, the Lethbridge College, and that's being partly funded by a grant from the province as well. We're documenting the Blackfoot perspective on that battle, because previous books that have come out about the battle have been mainly from the settler perspective. And you know, this is a national historic event, so there's a great opportunity there to have interpretive signage and so on in the River Valley, walking tours, VR apps that the college are working on for it. So lots of opportunity to draw people down into that space and really bring more tourism in around this historic event. So I'll turn you over now to Andrew Malcolm. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So from an economic development lens, active, welcoming public spaces help drive local economies. We believe strongly that there exists a great opportunity to embrace and advance place-led development, infrastructure, and programming to produce better economic outcomes. And this includes hardware and software. From a hardware perspective, those are our physical spaces, the horizontal infrastructure like parks, streets, and benches, as well as the vertical aspects like arts and cultural facilities, commercial buildings, and homes. Over the last 9 months, some of the exciting projects that we've completed in this space include the 3rd Avenue reconstruction between 4th and 8th Streets, Festival Square Permanent Market Plaza, and many other smaller scale public realm enhancements, in particular draw attention to all the patio and parklets. Further, we have begun an exciting project with the Warehouse District Area Redevelopment Plan, and this is the plan that will provide the overarching vision to future placemaking efforts such as transportation corridors, open spaces, heritage resources, and public art, all grounded in a placemaking approach. Next slide, please. The software is often even more important. These are the ideas, the experiments, the events, and rituals that shape the character and the feeling of a place. Over the last 9 months, this has included an exciting pollinator cafe collaboration with the Parks and Helen Schuler Nature Center that brought pollinator pods down to the downtown. The Festival Square programming, which to date has already seen over 100 hours of programmed activity from roller skating to concerts. And the Reimagine Grant, Activation Grant, which brought us some exciting, vibrant events back to the downtown this year. In particular, the Wide Skies Reimagined, which utilized the rooftop of the Park and Ride and the Sandman Signatures parking lot overlooking the River Valley and the High Level Bridge, among other great initiatives. And so with that, I will pass things over to Charlene.
Okay, once again, good afternoon, everybody. Reconciliation and inclusion. I wanted to share with you in this update the significant work undertaken during this reporting period and the period before. What we've noticed is that everything we've worked through supports and solidifies City Council's relationship and the application of placemaking to reconciliation. The enhanced representation of Indigenous people not only contributes to Council's reconciliation goals, but can also enhance the sense of connection, respect, and belonging experienced by our Indigenous peoples living here in Lethbridge. Additionally, the coming together and coexisting of all of our members of a community has the potential to even impact social barriers and challenge that we are currently seeing that exist here in Lethbridge. Next slide, please. Since the last placemaking update to Council in December 2021, the following placemaking projects have been completed. I'm happy to share with you our West Lethbridge New Fire Station 5 mural. There's my heart rate raising for everybody. Aikitapi, which is brave and fearless. It was unveiled and is a great addition to the place and the new space here on our west location. Second is the Zamboni artwork that we unveiled during the Alberta Treaty Hockey Provincials. This was a very successful event that brought hundreds of Indigenous athletes to our city of Lethbridge. They were welcomed by our mayor and many dignitaries of our neighboring nations. Third, and more recently, is the land acknowledgement and territorial welcome that was unveiled at the Lethbridge Airport, helping showcase the newly renovated facility. Lastly, nearing completion, we are very excited to report that we have 2 projects being unveiled during our upcoming Reconciliation Week that we invite all of you to attend. The first one, which is happening at the Park Place Mall, is the ever-popular Oki signs. We call it Oki 2.0. We've had to refabricate the Oki signs as a response to the popularity and frequency of use during the time that they were originally unveiled. We've required more sustainable materials to avoid unintentional damage. And an interesting note is that this project garnered a private investment partner through Primaris, among many, many individuals and partners involved. So I do wish to acknowledge and invite everyone to join us as we will be unveiling Wednesday, September 28th at 11 o'clock. Lastly, we've got the Great Bear Boulevard Interpretive Project. This will be unveiled following the original unveiling, Thursday, September 29th, also at 11 o'clock. Our last update at this point in time, I would like to make you aware that we do have the project underway, which is the Indian Battle Park Interpretive Project. And we're pleased and fortunate to be connected to many of the partners who support and provide a great wealth of knowledge and the history here for Lethbridge. And it's a great wealth of partnership, knowledge to share in terms of placemaking here for the city. Thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to Jillian.
Placemaking, when applied successfully, will facilitate growth across many domains examined in the NDP, including cultural and social development. Every community has its own unique social and cultural identity, which should be celebrated in shared spaces. Cultural identity is closely aligned with a person's individual sense of engagement, belonging, and appreciation for a place. Placemaking capitalizes on a community's unique assets by creating opportunities for individuals to feel included and connected to others who occupy the same shared spaces. Next slide, please. Placemaking projects currently underway in the realm of cultural development include the development of a civic culture plan, the implementation of the 2022 to 2025 Public Art Work Plan, a review of the city's monument policy, and the development of a placemaking implementation framework. Next slide, please. A cross-disciplinary working group led by Rec and Culture and Opportunity Lethbridge is working collaboratively with other city departments to develop and recommend to Council a streamlined placemaking implementation framework. This framework will serve as a platform for cross-departmental conversations at the City of Lethbridge. It will also serve as a gateway for the public to be more meaningfully engaged in planning and activating shared public spaces. Today's update is offered as information, continuing the placemaking conversation initiated with Council in December 2021. Administration looks forward to ongoing dialogue with you through future updates, and we anticipate the placemaking implementation framework will be presented to Council in Q4 2023. Thank you. We're available for questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bracken. And do we have questions from members of council? Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Chair Campbell. Thank you all for the presentation and the update. Just to be clear, and I think Ms. Bracken just answered this in the final section, this is an update. I think it was policy 40 and 57 in the MDP that instigated this work, and so it's already been approved, so to speak, to move forward, and we're hoping to see the implementation framework by the end of 2023. Is that what I took away?
Through the chair to Councillor Carlson, yes. Q4 2023, we'll be back with that implementation framework. Just to note, though, informally, the corporation's been doing placemaking work for a long time. We're just looking to capitalize upon that and provide some strategic framework to support future placemaking work.
Thank you for that. I notice also the report, I believe, indicated that there's no public engagement at this time, but I believe there has been public engagement. I believe I was part of some of it. Is there any further public engagement that people should know about if they want to throw their 2 cents in?
Not specifically informing the development of the framework, but I would say pretty much every project that we have mentioned has been connected with the public in some way.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other? We have Councillor Palladino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a question for you. The public arts work plan, and this is just, this is my curiosity. I fell in love with that artwork on the west side of the post office building, and I was just wondering what the status of that is.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Palladino, we are sentences away from executing that agreement with that artist. You're talking about the post building, so that project should be installed by the end of summer of 2023, so next year.
Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much all for your presentation. At the risk of making Ms. Bruised Head Mountain Horse even more nervous, I do have a question.
Repeat the name again.
The nervousness is gone now.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you. The Indian Battle Park Interpretive Project, I've seen some of that information come out. Can you, even for the public that are watching, can you discuss that a little bit more for us? Just outline what that looks like and what that might include?
Actually, I'm going to defer that through the chair. My apologies to Ross.
Thank you.
I won't allow it. Obviously, I have a lot of pull here.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to confirm, is that related to the battle sites?
Yeah, the Indian Battle Park Interpretive Project.
If that's what I'm understanding it to be, so the current phase that we're in is the research phase where we're gathering the stories, the oral histories and so on of the Blackfoot Cree battle. And then the next phase, which we hope to start at the beginning of next year, would be the dissemination phase, where we'd have to apply for different grants from the province and other places. And so some of the examples of how we'd hope to disseminate what we find includes interpretive signage in the river valley around the battle site, as well as perhaps public art, a bilingual book in Blackfoot and English. The Lethbridge College Digital Media Department are working on VR and AR apps currently, so that they could be used for virtual walking tours and so on. And we may also work with the Galt Museum to create guided tours and so on. So the current phase with the grant that we have from the province is just for research, so we can't spend it on that next phase, but that's what we hope to do next year.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? I see none, and I'm really, I just love I love our Oki sign and the kind of mileage we've gotten with it. It's just, and fact they're using it so much, and it was, of course, with the Canadian Curling Championships, it was right there front and center. So as I said, this is, Oki is what aloha is to Hawaii, Oki is to us, so I really love to hear that. I do have a resolution for Councillor Carlson. Be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee recommends that City Council receive as information the placemaking update as an attachment 1. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again for the update and presentation. It's always exciting to see. I appreciate Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel bringing up the Blackfoot Cree battle, or as I think it's called, the Battle of the Belly, which after 2 weeks of holidays and vacations, I am also fighting the Battle of the Belly right now. So hopefully I get a few days to work on that. But thank you for the update. We look forward to seeing the implementation strategy come in front of, I hope it comes to this committee first before council, so we can view it. But thank you for the information and update. With that, unless there's anything further, I'll call the vote.
Question's been called. All in favor? That passes. Very good. We'll move on to submission 6.1. This is has been passed on to members of the committee here. These are recommendations that council asked to bring back to us.
Mr.
And
Chair.
so, sorry?
Chair.
Yes.
So I've identified a conflict that I brought forward to Mr. Westerson in regards to the 28th. All members of council are tied up. So if we can, Mr. Westerson is going to make efforts to try and free us up for a period of time to be able to enjoy the reconciliation celebrations.
Okay.
That's the busy day. I tried to get it shifted.
Well, we're tied up with economic all day, and if we can break away for a period of time, that would be helpful. What day is that? The 28th. Yeah.
Okay. So, okay, moving to the submission. Okay, is there a resolution to that? You're just gonna make a.
Chair, I had some questions.
Yes, sure.
On it.
Yeah.
And
then fire away.
Through you to administration, perhaps. When I read through it, and I appreciate all the work that went into it, there are 31 recommendations here. In my, and of course I don't have it open, in my understanding that the first recommendation to create the committee or the group, whatever it would be called, is the most important one. Because as I read through the recommendations, I've been involved in discussions with various of our Blackfoot folks, and there's great disagreement on each of them. For one, the Indian Battle Park, I know at Arlac, we had I thought it was a no-brainer. Yep, let's change that name. And it was our Indigenous members who pushed back on me and said, no, it was a great Indian battle. And so I'm wondering, is the recommendation to move forward with all the recommendations, or would it be appropriate to approve the first recommendation and refer the other 30 to that group so they could have a fulsome face-to-face discussion? I know a lot of this was done on a survey where people couldn't have a discussion around things. So I'm wondering if that makes more sense to approve the first recommendation to create this committee working group. I can't remember what it was called. And then allow them to explore the other 30 and bring back their recommendations. I'd hate to approve things that didn't get a fulsome discussion, in my opinion.
Through the chair, I'll take a first crack at answering the question, and then I'll pass it off to Charlene if she has anything to add. As Charlene wasn't here during this report, it might be more difficult for her to answer some of the engagement questions, et cetera. Again, in the recommendation, what we thought is to create an implementation strategy aligning with recommendations 1 to 31. and bring that back to the SPC to analyze. So that would be probably the first part. The implementation strategy would be to implement number one and form that group, and then look at where budgetary alignment goes and everything else for other strategies, where some can be aligned at the same time, but some may be years and years out. But I agree with you. If it is the will of the SPC, we have no issues with just focusing on one first, organizing that committee, and then bringing back the rest at a later date.
Thank you for that, Ms. Bruce Head Mountain Horse. Any thoughts on that? And my further question is going to be, how doable is this, and what is a timeline for creating this group?
Absolutely, through the chair, Councillor Carlson. To the best of my ability at this point in time, engaging in this information that was assessed through the audit, I do think it's imperative that exactly what you've picked up, recommendation 1, and that essentially will allow us to implement a strategy moving forward as to what is recommended as priorities. If you look at the demographics that have been engaged in the survey, there was quite a diversity amongst the engagement. Populations existing here, city members, not primarily Indigenous, non-Indigenous. So whomever those individuals are participating, the feedback felt that those were the strongest, although it is, onerous with having 31 recommendations, right? But at this point in time, just to mirror and echo what Mr. Fox has said, I appreciate and think that it is logical to acknowledge a priority aspect of themes. I don't think there's one singular outstanding at this time that I've been able to prioritize. I wouldn't feel confident doing that without the advocacy group. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
2 titles. I would like to ask Councillor Carlson to get out of my head, because that was pretty much exactly the same question I had when I was. Just read your notes. Yeah, I'm just gathering it all in. Stop stealing my homework. When I went through everything, and I certainly appreciate the work that's gone into this. I think it's important that we look at this work. It's important that we move forward on this work. But then when I took a look at the motion that we were looking forward to create and implement strategy aligning with recommendations 1 through 31, I was uncomfortable with that, because I don't know that that will be successful going through all of council. And I would agree with Councillor Carlson in that recommendation 1, yes, move ahead with, but then if we had a strategic priority list and then a presentation back to all of council so that we could have a discussion on that, I know I would be much more comfortable with that, because I would like to hear what other members of council, not just this group, although we are fully competent and I'm sure we could make decisions. I would really like to hear what the other members, all of the other members of council have to say on all of these items. And then that way council can move forward as a united front and behind and support all of this as well. I want these to be successful. And that's where my concern came in the most, is making sure that we are successful in moving forward with as many of these as we could. So that's just my feedback. And when I look at this, I would be supportive of recommending 1, but then getting that group together, prioritizing, bringing a presentation back to this group to forward on to council so that we can do it in a step-by-step kind of process and make sure we're successful at getting these done.
Was that kind of the intention that being here today? Is that sort of what your intention kind of was anyway?
Through the chair, bringing this report back was direction of council. So we are bringing it back, and if it is council's will, we will do all 31 and bring back the implementation strategy. And if it's the SPC would prefer to recommend number 1, we will do that as well. And I did get a reminder that there wasn't just a survey, there was some other engagement that happened, but that number 1 is also high on our priority list if we were to move forward with it.
Okay, with that, Councilor Middleton Hope.
Just one comment in regards to the report itself. And I appreciate the observations and the recommendations of my colleagues. There is language in I mean, certainly some of the recommendations I can certainly get behind right off the bat. There's some that I would certainly struggle with. But what I noted in this, and perhaps those that participated in this process might be able to clarify it. There appeared to be a couple of these that indicated that one person out of whoever was surveyed, whoever was reviewed, made a comment about a particular item. And I would caution language around that where it sounds like it's one person's opinion. I think it needs to be consensus built rather than perhaps just one person who said, yeah, I think the name of that street needs to be changed to this. Let's maybe, if there's a consensus from a group that is more fulsome and says, yeah, we'd really like to see the name of that street changed to this, I think that would be helpful. Certainly coming before council and certainly in terms of marketing this to the public in the future. And that's something that absolutely has to be considered. So thank you for that.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to administration, if I can. If council did say proceed with recommendation number 1 to create the committee and further refer the other 30 recommendations to them for their vetting, consensus building, etc. What's the timeline on getting the committee together, and B, is there an existing committee that could undertake this? I immediately think of RLAC. However, there's I think there's a broader group that needs to be part of this. There's not. There are some amazing elders that are part of our RLAC, but it's far less big than I think this may need to be. So what would be the timeline to creating such a committee?
Great question. Through the chair, I think I would have to take it away and look at number 1 in isolation and have some discussions with everyone. It may be a place for RLAC. That did come up in my mind. But instead of just having RLAC alone, it could be a subcommittee of RLAC. But we would also have to wait until the committee commissions is finished. I know RLAC has done some work on their terms of reference. And as that goes forward, we would have to see how that moves forward as an entity. But also, I would prefer to have a little more discussion with Charlene and other staff to make sure that I put appropriate timelines in place. I don't think a committee would be quickly formed. So if it was something that you were looking for in the next couple months, I don't foresee that, but we would be acting on it right away.
Thank you for that. So, but would direction from this committee or possibly us recommending to council to proceed with recommendation number 1 give the direction then to move forward and come back to us and say, okay, here's what we need to do. We need to create the bylaw. We need to do X, Y, Z. Then we need to start recruitment. And then you would be able to give us a bit of a timeline on how this could be implemented?
Correct. If we had that direction, we could report back with a fulsome timeline on the execution of the first item.
Thank you. Maybe I'll follow up then to, Mr. Westerson, who's... Sorry about that. I'm sorry.
He was just reading her notes.
Yeah. It really
You guys
makes it
just
look...
stop stealing my homework.
Makes you look like you're really read up on the meeting when you do it. Mr. Westerson, just on that, is it this committee that could move it forward, or would it be our recommendation to council? I'm just, because we're kind of new into the SPC world, I'm not sure how we could move this forward. Is it to council? Is there a budget consideration? Does this committee have a budget? I thought we used to, but now I'm unclear.
To answer your first question, the direction would come from council. So this would be a recommendation to council to create a committee, because council can create committees. The second part of that question, no, this standing policy committee does not have a budget.
How do we get a budget? Okay, no, I'm good. Thank you. Bottle drive. We're going to have a bottle drive and a bake sale, folks.
Yeah, let's have Mike shave his head again and we'll sell his hair. You took away your question, or did you have a question?
I did. It was actually, Councillor Carlson has a nasty habit of getting into people's heads.
Yeah.
I can see that. And that was my question, to not only identify whether there was a budget associated with this, but as you move forward as a committee, to attach a dollar figure for those that are sensitive to costs to any of the recommendations that might be coming forward. Simply because some would have a very nominal cost, others may have a very significant cost. And so providing you with a budget, and I'm sure you've got so much money over there in C&D, you can carve something out. But at the end of the day, I think it would be appropriate to look at a budget for a committee, if formed, and what the costs are of any and all recommendations that come forward.
Through the chair, any recommendations that would come forward would have budget and time considerations brought forward. And I know some of that work has been already done on some of the recommendations, but again, once we would form a committee, I think the first decision is, would it be a committee of council or would it be an administrative committee? And then, you know, we will bring back a recommendation on all that and the timelines after we meet with all of the administration on this.
By the time this committee gets crafted and budgets get allocated and so forth, the budget for 2023 to 26 will already have been struck, etched in stone, and will be moving forward. So you'll have to, clearly, you'll have to look for money within your own directorate.
Yeah, through the chair, we do have some money for Indigenous placemaking, and there's also some CIP money that we are planning on bringing a report forward, probably in the new year, with saying how we will spend those funds over the term of this council.
I feel there's an amendment coming to this resolution.
Well, yeah, we're reworking it.
Okay. So we're going to just, another 5 minutes?
Jeff needs coffee.
Okay. We'll just on stand. Oh. Oh. Is this it?
It was locked. I couldn't get to it.
So we'll just talk amongst yourselves. Coffee talk. All right, I have a resolution from Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel. Be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee recommends that City Council direct administration to implement recommendation number 1, the development of a committee composed of knowledgeable Indigenous people, including elders and Indigenous members of the community and surrounding region, to create an implementation strategy aligning with recommendations 2 to 31 contained within the Indigenous Placemaking and Public Realm Audit, Attachment 1, with a report back by the end of March 2023. Councillor, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yes, again, I think this is important work for us to get done. I thank the group for putting this report together. I want to see this be successful, and I think focusing on the first one, taking the rest of the recommendations forward to a group that can carefully examine them, prioritize them, and then bring them forward to council so that we can ensure it's successful and this moves forward as seamlessly as possible. If no other members have questions at all?
There are questions. Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you. In regards to the motion, the committee is composed of knowledgeable Indigenous people. There are also other people, and I think we're excluding anybody else that may have a historical background. I was thinking, for example, of Ms. Croson, who has a very knowledgeable background. Are we excluding them by simply saying composed of, as opposed to language that might be inclusive of not only Indigenous people, including elders, but also others that may have a contribution to make? Well, that landed flat.
Yeah.
I think that would probably be best directed to administration, the folks who've done all the work.
Particularly because we pulled that out of the
Yeah,
recommendation.
because that was the recommendation number one.
Yeah, through the chair, we were talking, we have talked about this, and the committee would not just be limited to the Indigenous people, elders. So your point is well taken, and I think it would be not limited to those groups. I think the focus would be, but we would have to have other knowledge keepers in the area as well.
So could something like be the committee to include knowledgeable Indigenous people? That would not necessarily exclude anyone, but speak specifically to including a group of people that you want to be participating.
I believe administration's fine with that. Again, we're going to be going away, and before we create a committee, people would want to know what type of committee they're joining, so we would have to create a terms of reference and everything. So I think if that language is put in there and administration takes it away,
we just removed composed of, if we just removed the word, the first Indigenous.
Knowledgeable people.
Committee composed of knowledgeable people, including elders and Indigenous members.
That says it all. That pretty much says it.
So
that makes sense?
Is that a friendly amendment or a hostile amendment?
Yes, no, I can appreciate what you're saying there, and I would be happy to accept that as friendly as you can offer it.
And can I just, if I can, to throw it back on the folks that I rely on for better knowledge, as Bruce said, Mountain Horse, does removing the word Indigenous there, is that okay? Every time I do any of the work in any sector, every person always says, nothing about us without us. We were doing a bunch of poverty reduction work, and it was all a bunch of us middle-class folks doing poverty work. And it was people of the community said, no, it should be a bunch of people living in poverty doing the work. Is that still an appropriate? I just don't want to cause offense to anyone by saying it. And I hate to put you on the spot.
Like, oh, there we go. Yes, thanks. Through the chair, Councillor Carlson, there we go again. I think it is appropriate because when you look at the wordsmithing of this, we don't want it to be so broad or so, restrictive. Commitment composed of knowledgeable people, including Indigenous elders. So even if you want to prompt that previous, composed of Indigenous elders, Indigenous members, and knowledgeable people of the community and surrounding region, I would see that as inclusive. So when the previous question from Councillor Middleton Hope, I do feel it is engaging. It is aligning with reconciliation and inclusion. And the wordsmithing of that, we don't want it to be subject to interpretation of misunderstanding. So I do appreciate that recognition of that, and that would be my supporting of the wording there.
So basically, Charlene, if you...
Knowledgeable Indigenous people, composed of...
Knowledgeable people, including Indigenous elders and Indigenous members of the community and people in the surrounding area.
I said that rather quickly, but similar to, sorry, through the chair, my apologies, Councillor Schmidt-Rempel. Okay, maybe I'll take a step over and just assess them.
Yeah, I think just flipping it so that it is composed of elders and Indigenous folks and knowledgeable people. That puts the focus where I think the focus needs to be. Thank you.
Okay, are we good with the wordsmithing of this? Yeah. Yeah.
We should probably have a comma after, so Indigenous elders, comma, Indigenous members, comma, and knowledgeable people. And then get rid of the comma after that one. Yep.
There we go.
And the extra space between people and of, because that's going to make me crazy.
I think we need the Oxford comma.
Yeah.
Yes.
In the list.
Yes.
Are you good with that, Charlene? That's good? Are we good with that? All right, so I'll leave it back to you, Deputy Mayor, if you want to close, if there's anything else you'd like to add.
No, thank you very much for other members of this committee and the participants of this committee who attended today to help wordsmith this. We do want it to be successful. So I appreciate that, and with that, I will call the vote.
Vote's been called. All in favor? Good. That passes, and we are done this meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Very much.